Hi, this is Miss McClellan here to go over some practice with you. This is practice for IM2 2.1.1, identifying triangle congruence theorem. All right, if these are congruent, what is a proof theorem I could use to prove it? And in fact, these are, because they have 3 congruent side lengths. This is shared. So these are congruent by side, side, side congruence. Next, if they are congruent, what theorem can I use to say so? Well, these have 2 congruent angles and an included side. So that's angle, then side, then angle. Angle, side, angle, congruence. Next, we have 2 congruent angles and 2 congruent sides, and it looks like the angle is not included within the sides. It's angle, side, and side. And we should know that this does not work because donkeys and cars don't work. ASS is a way of saying donkey. And let's just give a quick example why this can't be possible. These are not necessarily congruent. And here's an example for why. So consider this triangle and this triangle. Well, these could have 2 congruent lengths in sequence and a congruent angle, and they would not be the same triangle anyway. So angle, angle, side is not a usable sequence. Next, vertical angles are congruent, everybody. So we don't just have one angle, we have 2. So we have an angle, then a side, then an angle. And in this case, the side is included. So these are congruent by angle, side, angle, congruence. Next, we have 2 right triangles and a leg. We don't know about the hypotenuse. Let me think. I'm going to say we don't have enough information. These are not necessarily congruent. And in a later problem, we'll say what information, if we had it, if we had more information, would we be able to say these were congruent or not for sure? Okay, next. If the triangles are congruent, name a proof theorem. Let's see. We've got 2 sides and an angle here. So for this one we have side, angle, side. Not necessarily congruence, I'm just saying what we have in sequence. An identified side, then an angle, then a side. And on this one we have a side, and then a side, and then an angle. These don't work, they are out of sequence. These are not necessarily congruent, out of sequence. Next. All right, we have a different prompt now. Now it says, state what additional information is required in order to know that the triangles are congruent for the given reason. So if I want to use angle, side, angle, and I'm given an angle and then a side, what else do I need? I've got an angle, I've got a side, I'm going to need the next angle, and it has to be in sequence. So I would need to know that angle U, sorry, I have to name it better, DUT is congruent to angle SUT. And a lot of the time, I find students are confused about naming angles. So let's just quickly review. Angle SUT is this angle right here. And angle DUT is this angle right here. And we would need those to be congruent in order to know the triangles are congruent. Next, what would I need in order to use side angle side here? Well, I would need to know, let's see, so far I have a side and then an angle. I would need the next thing I had to be a side. So I would need to know that the length AC were equal to the length JL, meaning side AC congruent to side JL. Next, if I wanted to use side, 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 I already know that Q and QS is the same for both triangles. I've got two sides. I would need to know that side RS were congruent to side QD. RS congruent to QD. That's the missing information. Now for this one, if I wanted to use hypotenuse leg, I would need to know the length of the hypotenuse. I have a leg. I would also need to know that we have right angles. So I would need to know that angle KXL were congruent to angle WVX were congruent to 90 degrees. This is not perfect notation. I should have said the measure of each equals 90 degrees. So let me fix that. Make this say measure equals the measure of this angle equals 90 degrees. Okay, so I would need to know that they were right triangles so that I could use hypotenuse leg congruence. And I would need to know that the hypotenuse of each triangle were the same length. Otherwise, I can't use hypotenuse. So I would need to know that XW were congruent to VK and that they were right triangles. All right, what would I need to do in order to use angle side angle here? Well, I have the angles, but I don't have the included side. So I would need to know that this included side, side DE, were congruent to this included side, side KJ. So I would need to know that DE were congruent to JK. All right, next, what do I need in order to say side angle side here? Well, I have an angle on each and in sequence with a side. I want side angle side, so I could say I already have my one side and one angle. After the angle, I would need another side. So after the angle, I would need to know that side JI were congruent to side TS. Next, I want to use side angle side. I have sides given. I know that vertical angles are congruent, so I have an angle in sequence. The next thing I need is the side on each triangle that follows the angle, so that the angle will be included. Okay, so I need WV to be congruent to VM. So I need WV congruent to VM. That might be the last problem. Yeah, it is. Well, thanks so much for your time. Hope this helps. Have a great day.